We are going to be going through a series, inshallah, on modernism, and each session is going to build on itself on the prior session, and inshallah, we're going to cover a lot of interesting topics related to modernism, this idea of modernism. What is it and why is it so dangerous? How can we address it? How can we understand it? And how can we live in this modernistic world? Modernism, being modern, these all have positive connotations, but for Muslims, actually, it's something that is very dangerous and problematic and a source of actually a lot of death and destruction and loss of life, loss of tradition. This is a plague that has affected the Muslim world, and it continues to infect and cause damage to the ummah. So when you have secularism, liberalism, feminism, these all fall under the heading of modernism. And when we ask the question, what are modern sources of doubt? Essentially, what are the usul? What's the asl of the doubts that Muslims have today? If a Muslim comes and asks, why do women have to wear the hijab in Islam, but men do not? In fact, why is there double the inheritance for males as opposed to females when it comes to inheritance as described in the Quran? Why in general are there different rules and regulations for males versus females in Islam? How can we prove that God exists? All of these doubts related to atheism. These doubts are actually all related. They're all related in the sense that they come from the same roots. They come from the same branch, basically. These kinds of problems are related, and so to address them, you have to address the source. And the analogy that I use is if you have a fire that crops up in the kitchen, and then you have a fire that crops up in the living room, and then you have a fire that crops up in the backyard or the bathroom, you might think, oh, well, we have to go put out one fire, then I have to go put out the other fire, then I have to go put out the other fire, and you don't really know the source. And that's very time consuming, and it can be very dangerous because you're not necessarily going to be able to adequately address every single fire that's coming. But if you understand the source, like, oh, maybe this is an electrical problem, and that's the wiring in the house is what's causing all of these fires, then you can address the electrical problem. You can address the actual root cause of those fires, and then no fires will come from there again. And you'll be prepared in the future, right? If there are any other fires, you know what the source was, and then you can diagnose the problem and address it in a very compelling and satisfactory way. This is our approach to doubts as well. When we understand where these doubts are coming from, how they're all part of the same overarching problem, then we can address it more systematically, and we can address it in a more compelling way, a stronger way, and we can anticipate doubts that might come in the future and have an ability to address them before they cause damage to people's iman. So this is why we talk about the sources of doubt, and the prime source is modernism. Modernism is the prime source of doubt. So I remember actually a talk that I gave several years ago at a masjid, and at that talk I asked the community members who were attending if they believe that Islam is a way of life, a complete holistic way of life. And I told them, just raise your hand if you think that Islam is a complete way of life. And everyone raised their hand. They said, yes, Islam is a complete way of life. And I asked, okay, how many of you think that Islam should be the criteria by which laws are based? Our laws and government, our system of governance should be based on Islam and what Islam says. Then there weren't as many people. In fact, it seemed like only half of people raised their hands affirmatively for that. So isn't that a contradiction? Doesn't that contradict? Like, you think that Islam is a holistic way of life, but you do not accept that this holistic way of life of Islam should guide governmental decisions or public policy, or how do we set up the economy, or how do we understand relationships between people, between members of a community, between members of a society, within families. Should Islam be the guidance that we first and foremost look to when we want to understand how to raise our children? If Islam is this holistic way of life, and Allah has completed the deen and selected for us and for all of humanity the deen of Islam, then it should have guidance for all of these aspects of life, all of these areas of human existence. So how can it be for Muslims to acknowledge that yes, Islam is a holistic, complete way of life, but then they waffle, okay? They waffle when it comes to these actual areas of human life. Some Muslims waffle in that way. Why? What is causing that contradiction? And unfortunately, we see this in the Muslim community, but this is not just limited to Muslims. We see in other communities as well. When it comes to other religions, you have people who call themselves Christian, or they'll call themselves Jew or Hindu or Buddhist or atheist, and they will say that, yes, I believe in these things. This is my aqidah per se. But when it comes to these areas of life, no, we appeal to psychology, we appeal to political science, we appeal to economics, we appeal to certain liberal values and principles, we appeal to critical race theory, we appeal to decolonization theory. That's what's providing the guidance. Okay? They won't necessarily say that this is guidance, but they'll say this is how we understand the way that the world is, the way that the world works, how human beings should treat each other and behave. That's their understanding. So really the label that is there, the label that I'm a Christian or I am a Jew or I am a Muslim, but the heart and the mind is really operating on a different set of assumptions. It's operating on the set of a different religion. It's operating on the basis of a different ideology or conception of right and wrong, different conception of what the universe is, what life is, what our situation as human beings is. If we accept that Islam is a holistic way of life, then we accept that Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have answered all of these questions about who we are. Okay? We're insan, we're human beings. Why are we here? We haven't been created except to worship Allah. Where are we going? We're going to death, and then there's going to be the barzakh, then there's in the qabr, then we're going to go to be judged on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Okay? What exists? Allah exists. Then the creation exists. The throne, al-arsh, exists. The malaika exist. The pen and the tablet, al-lawh al-mahfuz, exist. Okay, it's important to know what exists. When you understand what exists, then you understand your place in the larger creation. Okay, when you understand yourself and your limited position as a slave, a creation, then you understand that you have to worship the Creator. So these are very important questions that Islam provides the answers to. But if you don't accept Islam and you have done kufr, you'll go to other ideologies to provide answers. Atheism provides answers. Christianity provides answers. Judaism provides answers. And modernism provides answers. Modernism provides the answers that the majority of people in the world will go to. And this is why I was saying that you have people who, they say that they're Christian. You go to an average Christian in America or in Europe, and you ask this Christian, tell me about the nature of human existence. And he'll say he's a Christian, but maybe he will read to you some philosopher. Maybe he will talk to you about what he saw on TV. Maybe he'll open a book of, some popular celebrity autobiography about life. What is the meaning of life according to Barack Obama? What is the meaning of life according to Fulan celebrity? This is what their understanding is based on. These kinds of ideologies and ideas. You ask a Jewish person or ask a Hindu person, some of these secularized Hindus, what do you think should be the way that we organize society? And it doesn't matter, especially if they're college educated. They'll say, look, we believe in liberal values. We believe in human rights. We believe in this secular separation of church and state. Okay, so that's where your beliefs are coming from. You have the label of Christian, Jew, or Hindu, or even atheism, but your actual beliefs about how to organize society, how to run government, what policies to put in place, those are all dictated not by your holy books, what you consider to be your holy books. They're not dictated by, your prophets, who you consider to be prophets. They're dictated by modern philosophies, modern ideas. So this is what we mean, that if we ask what is the most dominant religion today, what is the most dominant value system today, if you ask Muslims, when I ask Muslims, they usually say Christianity. They say Christianity is most dominant. But this is not true. Christianity, it's not on the basis of the Bible that, some of these politicians and these governments are running and organizing themselves. It's not on the basis of the Bible. It's not on the basis of Christian tradition. It's not on the basis of church doctrine. Not at all. So what, if it's not that, then what are they basing their policies on? What are they basing all of their organization on, and how they're running society? When you ask the question of what is right or wrong, what is truly good, and what is truly evil, you ask someone like a young person today, they might say, yeah, I'm a Christian or whatever. But I think what is truly evil is, mansplaining. Or what I think is truly evil is the patriarchy. And what I think is truly good is equality of the genders. And what I think is truly good is making sure that LGBT has the rights that they deserve. This is what goodness means. And preventing that is what is evil. So what religion is that? That's not Christianity. It's not Judaism. It's not Hinduism. It's not Islam for sure. It's modernism. Modernism is this overarching religion, this overarching ideology. It's a religion that doesn't have the name of religion. And that's what's a problem with the English word religion. The English word religion has this connotation that it means a scriptural, traditional system of beliefs like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, etc. That's what religion is, but people don't associate ideologies or philosophies with religion. So we have to expand, or we have to move away from this word religion and instead look at a better term. And we know that deen, when we say that Islam is a way of life and we say it's a deen in the holistic sense, then what other adyan, what other deens are there? And modernism is exactly this kind of deen, this kind of way of life, the modern way of life. This is how we have to just frame it and conceptualize it. And we don't have to use the word religion. One word that I often use in my courses is paradigm. The modernist paradigm versus the Islamic paradigm, you compare them. They have overlap in some areas, but they have major distinctions between the Islamic paradigm and the modernist paradigm. According to the Islamic paradigm, our source of guidance is Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Islamic tradition and the ulama who are the inheritors of the prophets. These are the sources of guidance. But when it comes to the modernist paradigm, you have other sources of values, people's feelings, feminist doctrine, anything that is new and updated. There are many different intellectual movements, trends at any given time. So these things are always changing. And that's what really modernism is all about. Another way that we can understand it is when in the Quran, Allah is mentioning in Surah Al-Jathiyah, Allah is saying, have you not seen the one who takes for his God, his desires, for his God, his desires. So this is very profound because his desires or his ahwa, his hawa, if you look at the tafsir of this ayah in Surah Al-Jathiyah, you can look at Tabari or you can look at Qurtubi. The Mufassirun say that there is an example of what this ayah is referring to, of the Quraysh who used to worship different stones, okay? And Al-Uzza, the idol Uzza, was made of white stone. And what was observed amongst the mushrikeen were that if they're worshiping one particular stone, and then they saw another stone, they come across another stone, and it looks better, it's shinier, or it looks like it's more valuable, then they throw their idol, the previous stone, they throw it away, and then they start worshiping the new idol. And so the commentators are, this example is mentioned in both Tabari and Qurtubi, that this is what is appealing to them, they take as an idol, literally. So that's one understanding of this ayah, but there are other understandings as well, and you can also read in Ma'riful Quran, the contemporary tafsir, where it's also mentioned that people who are worshiping their desires, it doesn't mean that they will admit that this desire that I have, or the hawa that I have, is literally a god. They won't necessarily recognize that this is literally a god, but to worship it means to obey. You obey your hawa, your whims and your prejudices, caprice. These are the types of words that hawa can be translated as. It's a very comprehensive and profound term and concept, but it's usually translated as desire, it can be translated as whim, it can be translated as prejudice. And then another scholar, Imam Mawardi, says that the ahwa or hawa can refer to ara or itiqadat meaning beliefs or opinions, views. So this can also apply to hawa. So people today, just look in this modern period, when you have things like fads or celebrity culture, and these celebrities or these musicians are literally called idols, like American Idol, European Idol. They're literally called idols, and people are following them. They're following them and they're obeying them and they're mimicking them in their behavior, right? So this can be seen as hawa. And the crazy nature of it is that these celebrities, one person is popular today, and then the next day someone else is popular. The next week, the next month, someone new comes, someone more exciting. So just like the mushrikeen, just like the Quraysh that's being mentioned here, that they see someone that's better or someone who is different, and then they throw the old one away and they go to the new. They go to the new. They go to the new. What's the latest and the greatest? This is exactly what modernism is. This is exactly what modernism is. This is constant change for the sake of change, constant updating for the sake of updating. And it's not just with celebrities. You also find it when it comes to consumerism. People will buy a product and then something new will come and they have to go get the new product. And sometimes they'll change their entire lives around that product. Okay? You buy a new laptop, but that laptop won't sync with your phone, so you have to get a new phone, but that phone won't sync with your TV, so you have to get a new TV, and the phone also won't sync with the car that you have, so maybe you need to update your car. And this kind of consumerism is just constantly, you have to update, you have to continue to buy and spend your money in pursuit of what? These are ahwa. Consumerism, popular media, popular music, popular culture, intellectual movements that we mentioned. Okay? There are certain ideas that are popular one day and then they go out of fashion and they get thrown out. Something else is appealing. So when you look at the tafasir, the contrast that being made, or even just looking at the Quran, hawa is always contrasted with ilm. Hawa is always contrasted with ilm and huda and guidance, knowledge and guidance. And this is something that I've experienced. Maybe you've experienced it too, talking to different people, different, quote unquote intellectuals, and they'll say interesting things. They'll say that, I was reading Karl Marx, the communist, and yeah, I think that he makes some really, really good points, some really interesting points. I think I'm going to be a Marxist. But now I'm reading some post-structuralists and they're, raising some very valid and interesting points. I think, there's a lot to benefit from with this philosophy. And then the next week it's something else, the next month it's something else, and they're kind of very promiscuous when it comes to their intellectual interests. And it's a certain type of personality, but is this person really looking for guidance? Is this person really looking for the truth? Or is he just following dhann? Is he just following hawa? Is he just following what appeals to his limited mind that is not on anything, it's not upon anything? So this is, like being in the wind, like being in the air, hawa. Okay, that this is a related term. Means it's not anchored to anything. It's just floating. It just goes with the wind. Wherever the wind takes him, he goes. So even when it comes to intellectual movements, you find this desire being first and foremost. desire, ahwa, whims, and that's all what these ideologies are. Modernism as a whole, okay, is this idea of continuous updating, but feminism, if you think, as some of these feminists express, that why is it the case that in the Quran Allah uses the masculine pronoun instead of the feminine pronoun? Allah says to refer to himself, Allah says huwa instead of hiya, masculine huwa instead of feminine hiya. Why? That's unfair. Allah, we know that Allah doesn't have a gender, so we should be fine using the feminine pronoun for Allah. And you have some politicians, most notably a recent politician, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who claims to be a Muslim, but she's on record when she was interviewed about misogyny in Islam. She said, "My Allah is a she. My Allah is a she," like with full conviction. So, a'udhu billah, this is the type of mentality. This is just pure hawa. You have taken as your gods, your own ahwa. All of these ideologies, all of these philosophies. So let's talk more about some of the characteristics of modernism. And the organizers said I can go for 15 minutes since we started late. So I'll try to wrap it up, inshallah. When we look at modernism, what are some characteristics? What are some characteristics of this overall religion? Well, first of all, let's talk about its history. It began in the 16th century of European history, and it began, this is when historians generally say, in the 16th century after the Protestant Reformation. So there was conflict between the Catholic Church and the Protestants. And the Protestants broke off and they said, we're done with this corrupt Catholic Church that is taking advantage of Christians. We have our own interpretation of the Bible. We have our own methodology for understanding the Word of God and how to live as Christians. And we don't need this Catholic tradition. It's just a source of corruption. So this was the beginning of a lot of wars, a lot of bloodshed between Protestants and Catholics. And what it ended up doing, according to the standard narrative of history, is that Christians in Europe in particular became disenchanted with the Bible because the Bible is the source of so much conflict, and the Bible is so difficult to interpret. You have so many different interpretations. The Catholic scholars are ripping into the Protestant interpretation, and the Protestant scholars are ripping into the Catholic interpretation of the Bible, and it's causing chaos. And then the average Christian saying that, look, the Bible is not a source of guidance. The Bible is not a source of peace and harmony and organization. It's just a source of conflict and death and destruction. And to top it off, no one can really understand what it means. So there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from this disenchantment that Christians had with their books. And it all started when they cut themselves off from the tradition. They cut themselves off from the Christian Catholic tradition. And obviously the Catholic tradition was corrupt from very early on. Very shortly after Isa alayhi salam passed away, or was raised, I should say, was raised by Allah and saved by Allah. And he'll return, inshallah, in the end of times. But the Catholic tradition was corrupted, but even that corrupted tradition, they abandoned it with the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. And so what message is there for Muslims? We see the people who are so vulnerable to modernism, the people who are so vulnerable to feminism and liberalism and all these ideologies, they're the ones who are most insistent that we have to either cut ourselves from the tradition, we have to cut ourselves from the ulama, we have to cut ourselves, or we have to reform the tradition. We have to use maqasid al-sharia to reevaluate, revisit. Okay, if they want to be more diplomatic, they'll say we have to revisit these masail, these issues. So those are the people who are unanchored. They're the ones who are floating. They're the ones who, wherever the winds of modernism takes them, they will be vulnerable to float in that direction, away from the grounding and the firm basis of ilm and huda, and guidance, knowledge and guidance. This is a sign for us when we look at the history of these other of Ahlul Kitab specifically. So this was the Protestant Reformation, happened in the 16th century, and it led to this chain event, because if we can't go to the Bible for our understanding of the universe and for our understanding of human beings and what's right and wrong, what's good and evil, if we can't go to the Bible, we can't go to tradition, what else is there? And their understanding was that we have to go to the human mind, what they considered wrongly to think of as human reason. We have to use human reason, and we have to use science, we have to use rationalism, we have to use empiricism, and this is how we can answer all of these important questions about life. This is how we can organize society, by exercising the mind, by using these kinds of scientific methods. Science has the answer to what is right and wrong. This was their answer, but what they quickly realized is that, oh, none of us agree. There is just all of this very deep, heated ikhtilaf, disagreement between different philosophers, different scientists. And if we're honest with ourselves as a civilization, European civilization, if we're honest with ourselves, we can't say that that we have one coherent philosophy, one coherent system of belief. It's just a hodgepodge of all of these different ideas and views and philosophies. And plus, they're constantly changing. What is considered correct today is overturned tomorrow, even in science. Okay? We were following a kind of Platonic physics. Then we adopted Aristotelian mechanics or dynamics. Then we realized that that's not really correct. Maybe a Cartesian system, Cartesian understanding of motion. That's how we can understand the way that the universe works and moves and how the stars and planets move. We're using a Cartesian understanding. And then Isaac Newton comes in, no. Cartesianism is completely false and irrational. Here's a Newtonian mechanic. Within his Principia Mathematica, Isaac Newton has his physics, and then that lasts for over 2 centuries, and then Einstein comes and he says that no, we have to revise this. We have special relativity, we have general relativity. Then the quantum physicists come and they say no, we have new discoveries when it comes to the atom and the proton and the electron and so on and so forth. So okay, how is this rational? How is this rational when you have all of these different theories and ideas conflicting with each other and overturning each other? This is like, abrogation. Everything is being abrogated. How can we consider this to be a coherent way to live, a coherent way to understand the world? So then there's a trick that can be played. Because you can say that, well, as long as we are continuing to exercise our reason, and as long as we continue to exercise these scientific processes, and as long as we're open to change, that's all we need, because we can progress in this way. Okay? We just have to be open to change, be open to updating, be open to the latest and the greatest, be open to the newest innovation. We have to constantly innovate. This is the basis of modernism. And this is how the West can justify to itself that it actually has a coherent understanding, a coherent way of understanding the world. It's a modernist understanding. Modernist, that we don't commit ourselves to any particular idea. We don't commit ourselves to any particular way of life. In fact, it is regressive. If you commit yourself to a way of life, if you commit yourself to an idea and you say 100% this is right, 100% this is wrong, that's actually backwards. You're actually making a big mistake. You have to be open to change. You have to be open to updating. You have to be open to maybe tomorrow something new is going to be seen as right and wrong. And even within people's individual lives, they experience this. They say that, well, 5 years ago, I was quite a homophobic person. 5 years ago, I was very transphobic. 5 years ago, I was very misogynistic. 5 years ago, I didn't realize that there's not two genders. There are actually 100 or 1,000 genders. Now I know that, but I didn't know that 5 years ago. So I was transphobic or I was homophobic because I didn't feel comfortable sending my children to go to a library to be read stories. My 5-year-old child to be sent to the public library to be read stories from a drag queen. 5 years ago, I was uncomfortable with that, but now I am comfortable with that. So I've progressed in my understanding of what is right and wrong, what is decent and what's not decent is to be uncomfortable with that. What's indecent is to be uncomfortable with the drag queen reading to my 5-year-old. So even within a person's individual life, forget about 100 years ago. People 100 years ago, those people, of course, they didn't know anything about anything. Why? What reason? Why would you say that 100 years ago people were ignorant? They were irrational and they were immoral 100 years ago compared to today. Why would you say that? And the modernist will respond, well, it's 100 years ago. Of course. Isn't it obvious? It's 100 years ago. So just by virtue of the distance in time, that time has elapsed, 100 years has elapsed, that is the reason why we have progressed, why we're better. This is the modernist delusion. Just by virtue of time passing, the assumption is that people continue to get better, people continue to get more rational, they continue to get more moral, to such an extent that even within a person's own life, forget about 100 years ago, forget about 1400 years ago, even within my own life 5 years ago, I am a better person, I am more rational, I understand more, just because time has passed. Not because I've actually done a clear analysis to compare past and present. What did I actually believe? Is this coherent? Is this logically sensible? Is this a coherent philosophy or belief that I had before compared to what I have now? That kind of analysis is not needed. All you need to know is that there's a time that's passed. It's been 5 years, so of course now is better than the past. This is a modernist bias. It's a modernist bias. So to wrap up, there are two results of this kind of modernist bias that we should just keep note of. One is anti-traditionalism. To be a modernist means to be anti-traditional. Why? Because tradition holds you back. Tradition holds you back. If you are going to follow a madhab and you're going to follow a school of thought in anything, whether it's fiqh, whether it's aqidah, any field that you want to follow a scholar, you want to follow a madhab, you want to follow a manhaj, that's a tradition that you're following. That means you can't change. You can't just do whatever you want, right? Just following a religion, just following Islam, just opening the Quran and reading it and taking it seriously, what Allah has said. Opening hadith, a book of hadith, and reading what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said. This is, you're looking at something that is in the past. You're looking at something that is coming from the past, and that is going to restrict you from being able to think freely, to innovate freely, to do as you wish, and to have full choice, full options. And just because of that, you're going to fall behind. The rest of the world is going to advance and progress, and you're going to be stuck, chained because of this tradition that you're holding on to. Let it go. Just let it go. You need to innovate. You need to progress. What side of history are you on? What side of history are you on? If you're holding on to a tradition, you're on the wrong side of history. By definition, you're on the wrong side of history. By definition, you're on the wrong side of history. So you have to let go of these traditions. So modernism is anti-traditional. It's anti-traditional. That's one characteristic. It's a very important characteristic. And the second characteristic is that modernism is progressive. It's progressive. What does this mean? Is that what we just described. People today are more rational and they're more moral. Their ethics are better now than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Society and humanity continues to progress step by step by step by step. Purely by the passage of time and letting go of all religions and letting go of all traditions, people will advance and they will become better, they'll become smarter, they'll become more moral and ethical. This is progressivism. So what if you look at the timeline of human history, it's going like this. Up, 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 up. So imagine the sources of doubt. Imagine how much doubt this will cause if a Muslim has adopted this religion, this ideology, and this religion is what is animating his mind and his heart. These assumptions that are being pounded into his brain by his entire environment. If modernism is what is in his brain, then of course he's going to have doubts. Of course he's going to have problems with what Islam has to say about women's rights, what Islam has to say about governance, what Islam has to say about riba and the economy, what Islam has to say about family life, what Islam has to say about the rights and duties of the wife versus the rights and duties of the husband versus the rights and duties of children. Of course they're going to have a lot of doubt about LGBT. Of course they're going to have a lot of doubt about all of these different areas where there's a clash between what is considered correct, rational, and moral today, which is seen as the peak of rationality and the morality at the cusp of history. There's going to be conflict between that and Islam, of course. And that conflict is what is causing doubts. This is the source of doubts, modern doubts. So that is just a very quick overview of modernism and the modern sources of doubt. And next month, inshallah, we'll have a continuation of what we discussed today. But I have some homework for you to think about. Okay? Think about how a person can say that he is a Muslim, but all of his beliefs and all of his understanding of the world. Okay? Islam is not here just to say that this is the Quran, you read it, you pray your salah, you fast in Ramadan, you pay your zakat, and then, that's your Islam, and then you die, and that's it. Okay? And then you'll be judged. No, Islam, if you truly believe that Islam is a complete way of life and that Allah has chosen this deen for all of humanity and is a guidance for every aspect of our lives, truly believe that, as you should as a Muslim, then think about how modernism can play with that and can derail that and can diffuse that and cause a person to say and think that he's not only a Muslim but a traditional Muslim. He'll say, I'm a traditional Muslim. And he will, go to the halaqah and he'll go to this and that and he'll think he's a traditional Muslim, but his entire mentality and understanding of the world is dictated by modernism. See if you can think of examples. See if you can think of examples in your life. See if there's something within yourself. Right? See if there's something within yourself, your family, and just reflect. This is something that you can reflect, because if you recognize what this ideology is, modernism, then you can better address it and you can diagnose problems better. If you don't know what it is, then it's dangerous because it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's like the air that you breathe and the water that you drink. Then you won't be prepared to address it. You won't be prepared to understand it and to react to it and to prepare for it, to save yourself and your family from it. So recognizing the problem is half the battle. See if you can find examples of this.
سأل سائل بعذاب واقع للكافرين ليس له دافع من الله ذي المعارج تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة فاصبر صبرا جميلا إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا يوم تكون السماء كالمهل وتكون الجبال كالعهن ولا يسأل حميم حميما يبصرونهم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه ومن في الأرض جميعا ثم ينجيه كلا إنها لظى كلا إنها لظى نزاعة للشوى تدعو من أدبر وتولى وجمع فأوعى إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين هم من عذاب ربهم مشفقون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون والذين هم بشهاداتهم قائمون والذين هم على صلاتهم يحافظون أولئك في جنات مكرمون فما للذين كفروا قبلك مهطعين عن اليمين وعن الشمال عزين أيطمع كل امرئ منهم أن يدخل جنة نعيم كلا إنا خلقناهم مما يعلمون فلا أقسم برب المشارق والمغارب إنا لقادرون على أن نبدل خيرا منهم وما نحن بمسبوقين فذرهم يخوضوا ويلعبوا حتى يلاقوا يومهم الذي يوعدون يوم يخرجون من الأجداث سراعا كأنهم إلى نصب يوفضون خاشعة أبصارهم ترهقهم ذلة خاشعة أبصارهم ترهقهم ذلة ذلك اليوم الذي كانوا يوعدون